The domain name system is the foundation name service in Windows Server 2016 operating system. So let's continue with the next video from the chapter with implementing DNS server. Hello friends, Nick from NLB Solutions here, and today I'm going to show you how to install and configure DNS server in Windows Server 2016. For the purpose of this video I have two virtual machines. One is NLB Network 01 and I've only used the NW so I can keep it short, and the other server is my domain controller 01. So as you know, when you install a domain controller in your environment, it automatically asks you to install the DNS server service. This is because the Active Directory as a service works closely with DNS, and the DNS is required for the Active Directory services to be resolved by clients and by other services and applications in your environment. There are other services that depends on DNS, of course, like different applications, both Microsoft and non-Microsoft. And you can understand from the picture I'm drawing here that DNS is really important for your environment, and incorrectly configuring a DNS server can cause a lot of pain and a lot of applications not working, clients not able to resolve different names, both internally or externally on the internet. So it's really crucial for you to properly configure your DNS server. Let's start our demonstration by installing the DNS server role, and you can do this from the server manager, of course, or with PowerShell if you like, but in both cases you will be able to easily install the role. And as I mentioned before, the role is automatically installed, if you prefer, on a domain controller when you install the domain controller. But for this purpose I'm just going to install a clean DNS role, and in here we are going to check together what are the options when configuring the DNS zones and the DNS server in general. What are the properties? We're going to take a look for the DNS policies that were recently implemented, and I'm going to keep this short just to make a pretty much an overview of what is DNS, because the DNS as a name resolution technique is really a complex thing. So after we have our DNS server installed, I'm going to go to Tools and open DNS, and you can see that currently I don't have anything configured for this DNS server, which is the NLB Network 01. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure a DNS server, and a small configure a DNS server wizard will appear. So I'm going to click next, and this is the first window I'm going to stop a bit to explain. So the first thing you want to know and understand is what is the difference between forward lookup zones and reverse lookup zones. So if I can explain with few words, the forward lookup zones are used to map host names to IP addresses, and the reverse lookup zones are used to map IP addresses to host names. So for example, if you want to know where exactly is, for example, www.microsoft.com, you will try to ping this IP address or try to open in your browser, and this will use your forward lookup zone and later your DNS server to query where exactly is Microsoft.com and will return the IP address. On the other hand, if you try to ping or try to open an IP address, if there is a reverse lookup zone, it will find what is the host name. You can find what is the host name of the application or the service that stands behind this IP address. So the first two options that you see right there are, the first option is to create a forward lookup zone only, and this is used for small organizations that pretty much use forwarders that were provided by their ISPs, and we're going to speak about forwarders a bit later, but this is a simple and recommended for small networks. The second option is to create forward and reverse lookup zones, and this will create a zone both that using the forward zone you will be able to resolve host names, and using the reverse zone will be able to resolve IPs to host names. So this is recommended for large organizations, and this is a bit complex to configure. So if you are using this as a test, as a learning environment, you can create your forward lookup zone, and on a later state you can create the reverse to see how it's done. The third option is to configure the root hints only, and the root hints basically what is this is a list of 13 FQDNs that are basically the highest DNS servers on the hierarchy, and when your DNS server is not able to resolve a specific name, for example, or the forwarder that the DNS server is using is not able to resolve this name, it will go to these 13 servers. I will show them the list. You can modify this list, you can disable this if you want. So for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to keep things simpler and choose to create a forward lookup zone. And you can see that the next one is the primary server location. So you have two options. The first one is the server maintains the zone, and it will basically create a primary forward lookup zone. So what is primary forward lookup zone? So when a DNS server is both the host and the primary source for information about a certain zone, this zone is considered as primary for the DNS server. On the other hand, you have a secondary zone, and this means that the DNS server is the host but is a secondary source for zone information. So what I mean by this is, when I create my zone right now, it will create a primary zone, and it will create a file in my system32 DNS folder, and this file will contain all the zone information for that is hosted on this DNS server. This is considered as primary. But when I have another DNS server and I want to replicate the DNS information to this server, for example, I can add a secondary zone, and basically this is a copy of the zone. So this is not the primary host server that is hosting the zone. So these are the two options that you can see right here. I'm going to select the first one because I want to create a primary zone that I'm going to modify and configure the way I like it. So I'm going to name the zone as nlbsolutions.com, and I'm going to click next. And you can see that the next window will ask me if I want to create a new zone file or to use a file copied from another DNS server. So you have the two options, and you can see that to use an existing file, it will be currently stored in the system root system32 DNS. So when I create this file, it will be stored in this location. I'm going to click next. So the next window will ask me to configure the dynamic updates, and what this means is basically when a computer or a server connects on the network, if it is using DHCP, for example, if you configure this to allow non-secure or secure dynamic updates, it will the computer will register this IP address and the host name into the DNS server zone. So when another machine is trying to connect to this one, it will use and it will find the record for the DNS for the computer or the server. So you can configure secure dynamic updates and this option is only available if you use Active Directory integrated zones. And what this means is, when you install, as I mentioned before, when you install the Active Directory, it will it will prompt you to install DNS, and you can configure the zone to be integrated with Active Directory. So basically it will use Active Directory to replicate zone information to other domain controllers in your domain. And as you understand, Active Directory and replication is really secure mechanism, so it will allow you to only allow secure dynamic updates for the computers and servers in your domain. So for example, if a rogue server connects, or a rogue computer connects to my domain, my Active Directory will not allow this computer to register its information to my DNS zone, because what it can do is it can pollute the DNS, and it can even stop the DNS service from responding if it creates a huge amount of records that needs to be added. So I will just choose the option to allow both non-secure and secure, and you can see that it's warning me that it can be a vulnerability. But nevertheless, I'm using this in test environment. The next window will ask me to configure the forwarders. So this is a thing that I need to explain. So basically, your DNS server will be your primary server for resolving queries that are both internal and external. And what will happen if one of the clients tries to resolve Microsoft.com, which is an external to your domain? It will go ahead, because if it does not contain this in any cache information, DNS cache, zone caching, it will go ahead and will contact the root hint servers to find where exactly is the Microsoft.com. And this is a process that you need to check, because there is a difference between the queries in the DNS, between recursive and iterative, but nevertheless it will contact the root hints and it will find this information for you. But if you configure forwarders, and most of the ISPs provide DNS servers that are internet facing, and you can configure this ISP IP addresses or host names in here, and your DNS server will not contact the root hints. Instead, if a client tries to resolve Microsoft.com, it will send this information, it will send the recursive query, it will send the query to the ISP DNS server that is configured in the forwarders, and the ISP DNS will try to find where is Microsoft.com and will reply to my DNS server, and my DNS server will reply to the client. So in my case, I don't have internet access, so I'm not going to configure forwarders, but it's going to search now for root hints. So after it thinks about 30 seconds for the root hints, my DNS server is complete. So you can see right here that it's not able to configure root hints because currently I don't have internet access, but nevertheless I will show you the zone that we've configured. And the next thing I want to speak about shortly is the records that you will see in your zones when you in the forward lookup zone when you configure this. So the first two records that will be created when you configure a zone is the Start of Authority record, or SOA, and the name server NS record. So if I open the Start of Authority, you will see that there is a lot of information about this record, and this is really important for the zone. So in this record you will be able to find information like the incremental number of the zone. You will see the primary server that is hosting the zone, the responsible person, refresh, retry, and the time to live interval. And this all can be configured from here, so you can modify these values. You can read more about it, or if you have any questions you can specify them in the comment section, but this is a lengthy video, so I don't want to keep that much in here. The next one is the name servers, and this basically represents the servers that are responsible, that are hosting the zone. So you can add, remove, or even edit name servers from here. The next tab that I want to show you is the zone transfers. So you can see that you have three options. You can, if you allow the zone transfer, you can only allow zone transfers to servers that are in the name servers tab, or only in a specific servers, or to even any server which is can be a security vulnerability. So I recommend doing only to the name servers tab, and when you install a new DNS server, just add to this one and replicate the zone if you want a secondary zone somewhere to copy the information. Other records that you can configure are, you can see right here, you can create a host A record or quad A record for IPv6. So let us create a fast record. So for example, I want to create mail NLB solutions, and this is going to be my mail server, which does not exist, but I'm going to just add it as a test, and I can just add the record, and it's configured the record in here. So the next time when I try, for example, to ping CMD, when I try to ping mail.nlbsolutions.com, it will not be able to resolve it right away, but let me try to do an ipconfig flush DNS. And I will have to do another thing, which is going to be to add the DNS server in here, because currently it is not my primary DNS server. So I'm going to add another DNS server, which is my domain controller, and we'll flush the DNS once again, and we'll try to ping mail.nlbsolutions.com, and you can see I don't have this server in my domain, but it's looking into the DNS server zone file, and it's able to find the record for my mail server.